Everyone knows the hit movie Brokeback Mountain. It's the story of two cowboys forging a deep bond in the 60s. At the time of its release, in the early 2000s, the movie drew praises from the industry and criticism from conservative groups. It also had a huge impact on our culture, so in this video, we'll go beyond Brokeback Mountain the movie and explore the following. First, we will dig into the short story that inspired the movie and analyze its themes. We will dissect the famous movie adaptation and explore its portrayal of gay relationships. We will talk about the cultural impact of Brokeback Mountain and the controversies it sparked. We will discuss the people involved in the project and their motivations. We will also explore the legacy of the movie through the lens of academia. And finally, we will ask the questions, what is queer art? And is Brokeback Mountain queer art? This video is part of a series of videos I'm making for Pride Month, so make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Don't forget to like this video to help spread the word, and feel free to join the conversation in the comments below. Many of us know Brokeback Mountain, the movie with Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger, but the story of Brokeback Mountain actually starts in the late 90s, almost a decade before the hit movie won many Oscars. Brokeback Mountain originates from a short story by Annie Proulx published in The New Yorker on October 13, 1997. The first paragraph reads, "They were raised on small, poor ranches in opposite corners of the state. Jack Twist in Lightning Flat, up on the Montana border. Ennis Delmar from around Sage, near the Utah line. Both high school dropout country boys with no prospects, brought up to hard work and privation. Both rough-mannered, rough-spoken, inured to the stoic life." The story is simple. It's 1963 and two young men, Ennis and Jack, are hired to look after sheep on a ranch in Wyoming. They meet in Brokeback Mountain and create emotional and sexual bonds in a society where homosexuality is unthinkable. At the end of the summer, they separate and return to their respective lives. Both are married to women and have children. Over the course of 2 decades, the pair reunite occasionally to experience once again their secret but sincere bond. We will read more extracts from the story, but before that, here's what inspired the author to write the story in the first place.
So I was in one of the state's most delightful bars, the Big Mint Bar in Sheridan one night, and some guys were playing pool over by the little set-off room where the pool table was. And I noticed that leaning against the wall was this old guy who was an old cowboy with his scuffed up boots and his stained hat, obviously still working at the trade. And he was looking at the guys playing pool with an expression that was different, very unusual expression. It was kind of longing and sad and odd, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And then after a while, I began to wonder if maybe he was gay. And then I thought, well, what would it be like to be, and he was in his mid-60s or so, I'd say, what would it be like to be an old cowboy who was gay and who lived in a place where to be gay was asking to be really seriously hurt? So I began thinking about it, and I thought about it for months and months and months and months, and as I thought about it, the story began to take some shape. And so I wrote it.
So at the heart of the story is this question by the author. What would it be like to be an old cowboy who was gay in a place where being gay is asking to be seriously hurt? In the short story, the relationship between both characters develop over time. They share food, get drunk by the fire, and discuss their lives and shared interests. They had a high-time supper by the fire, a can of beans each, fried potatoes, and a quart of whiskey on shares. Sat with their backs against a log, boot soles and copper jeans rivets hot, swapping the bottle while the lavender sky emptied of color and the chill air drained down. Drinking, smoking cigarettes, getting up every now and then to piss, firelight throwing a sparkle in the arched stream, tossing sticks on the fire to keep the talk going, talking horses and rodeo, rough stock events, wrecks and injuries sustained, the submarine thresher lost 2 months earlier, with all hands and how it must have been in the last 2 minutes. Dogs each had owned and known, the military service, Jack's home ranch, where his father and mother held on, Ennis's family place, folded years ago after his folks died, the older brother in Signal, and a married sister in Casper. As the story moves forward and the two cowboys start sharing a tent, their intimacy deepens. The short story, like the movie, describes the now infamous intercourse scene in the tent. The author goes on to describe the aftermath of the intercourse. Ennis said, "I'm not no queer," and Jack jumped in with, "Me neither. A one-shot thing. Nobody's business but ours." I'm sure this scene resonates with many gay people's first experiences of self-discovery. At the end of the summer, both characters return home. Ennis marries his wife, and she gets pregnant. 4 years passed when Ennis received a letter from Jack. It read, "Friend, this letter is a long time overdue. Hope you get it. Heard you was in Riverton. I'm coming through on the 24th. Thought I'd stop and buy you a beer. Drop me a line if you can. Say if you're there." So the two reunite. They kiss and get caught by Ennis's wife, but the two spend the night in a motel anyway. At times, the short story can be explicit. It depicts a friendship and a sexual connection more so than a committed gay relationship. They're not boyfriends. They can't be anyway. Society won't allow it. I mean, here we both got wives and kids, right? I like doing it with women. Yeah, but Jesus ain't nothing like this. I never had no thoughts of doing it with another guy, except I sure rang it out 100 times thinking about you. And on that topic, Annie Proulx says that many people misinterpret the story she wrote. She says it's not about a happy ending, it's not about a love story. She says it's about homophobia, it's about a social situation, it's about a place and a particular mindset and morality. The characters must hide their same-sex attraction and conform to the society of the time. There's nothing they can do about it. "Friend," said Jack, "we got us a fucking situation here. Gotta figure out what to do." "I doubt there's nothing now we can do," said Ennis. "What I'm saying, Jack, I built a life up in them years. Love my little girls. Alma, it ain't her fault. You got your baby and a wife, that place in Texas. You and me can't hardly be decent together if what happened back there." The author says that the movie gets it wrong on the core aspect of her short story. It's not supposed to be about Jack and Ennis. The author also says that people are looking for happy endings to a fault. Here's what she said.
"The happy ending still beckons, and it is in hope of grasping it that we go on." The poet Wisława Szymborska caught the writer's dilemma of choosing between hard realities and the longing for the happy ending. She called it consolation. Hence the indispensable silver lining, the lovers reunited, the families reconciled, the doubts dispelled, fidelity rewarded, fortunes regained, treasures uncovered, and the dog Fido, gone astray in the first chapter, turns up barking gladly in the last. Thank you.
You see, Brokeback Mountain, the short story, does not have a happy ending. Ennis did not know about the accident for months until his postcard to Jack saying that November still looked like the first chance came back stamped deceased. The huge sadness of the North Plains rolled down on him. He didn't know which way it was, the tire, iron, or a real accident. Blood choking down Jack's throat and nobody to turn him over. Under the wind drone, he heard steel slamming of bone, the hollow chatter of a settling tire rim. Obviously, the movie is adapted from the short story, and for the most part, it remains faithful to the source material, so let's talk about the movie. But before we do, I want to take this moment to thank all of you who subscribed after the last video. We just passed 2,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for the response to the last video. I'm so grateful that you guys engaged with it, and I love reading all your comments. So if you haven't joined the fun yet, subscribe to the channel and join the conversation. Brokeback Mountain, the movie, was released in 2005. It stars Heath Ledger, Jake Gyllenhaal, Anne Hathaway, and Michelle Williams, and it was directed by Ang Lee. The movie is described as a neo-Western romantic drama, which is a departure from the short story. The budget for the movie was only $14 million, and it grossed $178 million at the box office, making it a commercial success. It is important to highlight the commercial success of the movie because many in right-wing circles had hoped for it to flop. More on that later. Despite being almost 20 years old, this movie remains contemporary in its themes. For example, masculinity is an important theme in the movie, which is relevant to today's conversation about toxic masculinity. Ennis is clearly trapped in masculine ideals. He struggles expressing his emotions. Speaking is difficult for him. In fact, Jack points that out very early on in the movie.
Man, that's more words than you spoke in the past 2 weeks.
Hell, that's the most I've spoken in a year.
Most times during the movie, when Ennis is reunited with Jack, he is calm and joyful. But his behavior is very different when he's with his wife, even going as far as threatening her with violence later in the movie. And we know he's capable of violence. We see him get involved in a few fights. Forbidden love is another theme in the movie. It's a tale as old as time. Like Romeo and Juliet, Ennis and Jack cannot be in love. They just can't. So, for most of the movie, the two must go on so-called fishing trips, isolated in the woods, to live their truth. Expressing their love in public is not an option in their society, and that notion is internalized by the characters. When Jack suggests they could move to a ranch together, Ennis can't even entertain that idea. It's too dangerous. And he goes on to recount a story from his youth when his father showed him the deceased body of a murdered gay man. It served as a warning, don't be gay or this will happen to you. And that notion of forbidden love hurts.
Tell you what, we could have had a good life together. Fucking real good life. Had us a place of our own. But you didn't want it, Ennis. So what we got now is Brokeback Mountain.
Depression is also depicted in the movie, which is relevant to our modern understanding of the queer experience. When Ennis and Jack are together, they are at peace. They live their intimacy. And the cinematography translates that on the screen. Brokeback Mountain, the location, is vibrant and colorful, but when they return home, it's gray and depressing. Much like the short story, Brokeback Mountain, the movie, does not have a happy ending. When Ennis's letter to Jack is returned with a deceased stamp, it's heartbreaking. Ennis decides to call Jack's wife, and she tells him that Jack's death was an accident. But Ennis suspects Jack was the victim of a hate crime, just like the one his father showed him as a kid. Later, there is this extremely sad scene where Ennis cries in Jack's closet. It's obviously a metaphor for their closeted relationship. When Ennis finds out that Jack kept his shirt all these years, he takes it home. So all that's left of their relationship is this shirt, a postcard of Brokeback Mountain, and the memories of Jack. It's so tragic. Now that we explored the movie and its source material, it's time to talk about the impact of Brokeback Mountain on our culture. First, it's worth mentioning that the movie sparked so much interest that parodying it became very commonplace. Here are some examples.
And here's a copy of my last movie. It's essentially Brokeback Mountain from the point of view of the horses.
Hey, the sun's been up for an hour. Shouldn't we get riding?
Are they still sleeping?
I don't know. I'll check. Ah! Help!
What?
Ah!
What is it?
Oh, Nelson. I'll never forget that week we were best friends.
These parodies were for entertainment purposes and to make fun of the phenomenon that was Brokeback Mountain. I don't think these parodies were malicious. Comedy should not be taken so seriously anyway. But the movie sparked some real debate. On the one side, LGBTQ+ groups were glad to see some representation on the big screen, but some right-wing groups took offense to the movie. This dynamic is described in a 2005 article from the Associated Press. The article was released before the movie, but after critics had praised the upcoming movie. This film has tremendous potential to connect with audiences, gay and straight alike, said Neil Giuliano, president of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. What Brokeback Mountain does, Giuliano added, is allow audiences to experience on an intensely emotional level how ignorance and intolerance can force people to deny their love and deny who they are. But Robert Knight, director of Concerned Woman for America's Culture and Family Institute, hopes the film flops. I can't think of a more effective way to annoy and alienate most movie-going Americans than to show two cowboys lusting after each other. Knight said on his group's website, "It's a mockery of the Western genre, embodied by every movie cowboy from John Wayne to Kevin Costner." By the way, I just want to point out the irony that the director of an organization called Concerned Woman was a man. Anyway, 2 months after the release of Brokeback Mountain, you could read this in the Los Angeles Times. Brokeback Mountain has drawn hoots of derision on Fox News from Bill O'Reilly, who said the film has earned rave reviews because the media, quote, wants to mainstream homosexual conduct. Here's what Bill O'Reilly had to say at the time.
So, probably not going to go see it, but you're going to see over the next month this movie being pushed and pushed and pushed by every media you can imagine. Why? Because they want to mainstream homosexual conduct. That's the goal.
It is interesting to see how the right at the time portrayed Brokeback Mountain as, quote, mainstreaming of homosexual conducts. Today, they're saying the same thing to justify the banning of queer books. We covered this in the previous video.
Battles have erupted at schools, school boards, and library meetings across the country as parents, lawmakers, and advocacy groups are debating the value and merit of many books.
In its report, the American Library Association documented more than 1,200 challenges to library books and resources last year. That's nearly twice as many as 2021, about 3 times the pre-pandemic average, and the highest since the ALA started collecting data 20 years ago. It also lists the 13 books that have been most challenged this past year, including the top 3, Gender Queer, a memoir by Maya Kobev, All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, and Nobel Prize-winning author Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye.
The movie even sparked debate on gay marriage, as evidenced by this banner on CNN. But most right-wing critics did not even bother watching the movie. Despite that, they gleefully went on TV to criticize its very existence.
No, I didn't see the film, and I'm not at all surprised that out of 7 nominations, Brokeback walked away with 4, and some might say that's an indication of what the Oscar ceremonies might look like later on this year.
Why would you comment on it if you haven't seen it?
Well, I'm interested in all of the buzz around the film. I'm not the least bit surprised that we're hearing so much chatter. After all, I think what we're witnessing, Larry, is the homosexualizing of America.
I've not seen the movie, Larry, and that's a matter of decision, not just a matter of chance. Like others, I don't feel any need to see the movie. I have read the screenplay, I know the short story, and of course I know what the movie's about because it's out there so much in the media. That's the main issue. I am not a movie critic. I really can't speak to the cinematography. I can just speak to what the cultural meaning of this film is and why I see it as a great challenge. But, you know, I really am horrified to think about where that story ended. You know, my main concern, Larry, is not with the gospel of heterosexuality, even though I think that's very important. It's with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And what I find lacking in the movie, the screenplay, and in the short story is any resolution that really brings these persons to know why they were created and how God really intends them to live and how they would find their greatest satisfaction in living just as God had intended them for His glory.
This, too, is reminiscent of today's panic on the right. I doubt many anti-drag opinion makers actually went to a drag drag story hour. We covered this in my previous video too. Right-wing opinion makers often use drag story hours to justify their hateful speech. These events are usually held in libraries where queer artists read books to children, but right-wing media frame this as indoctrination to stir fear among their viewers.
Indoctrination on your dime. New York Attorney General hosting a taxpayer-funded drag queen story hour.
There are a number of Republicans, self-described conservatives, who argue that drag is something to be feared. We've heard this before for some far-right voices. They say that it indoctrinates and sexualizes children. What do you say to people for whom that message resonates?
To say that you should fear drag, it makes no sense. I mean, most drag queens don't necessarily want to work or perform for children. Not all drag queens want to do that. There are some situations where we do drag story hour, or we allow all ages to come to a drag brunch show during a daytime event, but it's all within legal standing. And of course, again, that's a parental right, whether or not they allow that child to attend. And if you have a queer child that doesn't get exposed to difference and LGBT parts of their community, I feel like it's a parent's right to give them an opportunity to be around people that are more like them, to learn from that environment.
These events are harmless, except when members of extremist groups show up to terrorize participants and children. There was also criticism within the gay community at the time. In the LA Times, an op-ed contributor wrote this: "The praise these straight actors have garnered for their awesome achievements in portraying gay folks somehow obscure the reality that every day on Hollywood's large and small screens, legions of lesbian and gay actors are convincingly portraying heterosexual characters. Somehow, though, these achievements go without notice or recognition. And herein lies an important part of the story, Hollywood's devotion to the public heterosexuality of its stars." I do understand why people said that, and I think it's a valid criticism of the industry even today. But I find it rather interesting that, unlike the characters they portrayed in the movie, Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger were comfortable enough with their own sexuality to take on these roles. At the time, many actors refused to play gay roles because they feared that it would negatively impact their careers. Here's what Jake Gyllenhaal had to say about it.
To play a gay role is very, I'm sure you met with your agent and you said, hey, wait a second. Heath Ledger and I are thinking of doing this movie.
It moved me, the script moved me, and I was like, yeah, fuck it, you know what I mean?
I'll do it.
Yeah, and I also, I really we had no idea what it was going to be like.
In fact, the actors always had to defend the movie. Remember, Brokeback Mountain was released a decade before the US legalized same-sex marriage.
This is disgusting.
Oh. Well, I don't know. I think, I think it's a real shame. Well, I think it's immature, for one, really immature. But I think it's an incredible shame that people go out of their way to discuss or to voice their disgust, I should say, or negative opinions about the way two people wish to love one another. I mean, come on. I mean, at least voice your opinions on how two people show hate and violence and anger towards each other. Isn't that more important? I think so. So, I don't know. And it doesn't really concern me. I think it's a shame. But I also feel that I also feel like it'll surprise people. It's not particularly a story. I mean, it's obviously about two men in love, and it's obviously gay themed, and it's very easily labeled. But unfortunately, people are very quick in life to label something that they're uncomfortable with. The pure fact of it is it transcends a label. It's human. It's a story of two human beings, two souls that are in love. It's like, get over the fact that there's two men. That's the point. The movie is not a story about an epidemic or a virus or something that can be cured in hospital. We're showing that love between two men is just as infectious and emotional and strong and pure as it is with heterosexual love. And if you can't understand that, then just don't go see the movie. It's okay. We don't care. It's like, deal with it in your own private life. Don't voice it out, It's like, we don't want to know, and it's really boring and old and whatever, But we're very proud of it, and I think it's transcended that, And so,
This clip shows two straight men fundamentally disagreeing on the morality of a same-sex romantic drama, one saying it's disgusting, the other one defending the movie. This framed the debate in a very different light because it showed that things were moving forward, that we were not the only ones fighting for representation. Some straight people were on our side. Some people outside of our community thought portraying same-sex attraction was the right thing to do. In fact, they were willing to portray those realities themselves and defend the movie in public when needed. So in a way, the fact that Jake and Heath were heterosexual men showed a whole generation of kids like me that allies existed. I thought it was so cool that these actors took on these roles despite the hate that would come their way. It meant something to me. In addition, I would argue that the roles of Jack and Ennis are not meant to exude a lot of queer energy. These are two cowboys married to women with children living in an extremely heteronormative society, and they happen to discover their same-sex attraction. Until then, they never suspected they would live a homoerotic experience like that, and they spend most of the movie trying to come to terms with their same-sex attraction. It makes total sense to me that straight men portray so naturally the torment that these characters go through. And for that, the Brokeback Mountain phenomenon is much bigger than the film itself. It's much bigger than our community. It sparked important conversations about love, the portrayal of same-sex relationships in the mainstream, and allyship. And yes, the movie was intended for a broader audience, not just the gay community. That's why this movie is so ambitious in the first place. And it paid off. Brokeback Mountain went on to win many awards that year, including 3 Oscars. Ang Lee won Best Director, Larry McMurtry and Diana Ossana won Best Adapted Screenplay, and Gustavo Santalola won Best Original Score. The movie even won a GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Film. It rewards wide-release films for excellence in the depiction of LGBTQ+ characters and themes. Brokeback Mountain can also be analyzed on an academic level through the lens of queer theory. Queer theory is a term used in various disciplines including literary analysis, philosophy, politics, and other fields of cultural study. It functions essentially as a perspective that questions cisgender and heterosexual identities being perceived as the standard, and provides a thesis that revisits that field with a queer approach. A few published works analyzed Brokeback Mountain using that framework, further emphasizing the cultural importance of the phenomenon. Unfortunately, most papers are not publicly accessible, but this one was. The author says, "The movie is unique not only for the homosexual aspects of the relationship between the two cowboys, but it is the journey through the obstacles of a homosexual male that leaves them trapped in the closet, that brings that distinct quality to the movie and shows how homosexuality in this story lends a layer of depth to the plot." The author of the paper argues that Brokeback Mountain, the location, is an analogy for masculinity and the closet. The physical location of Brokeback Mountain is also an integral part of their relationship, as it represents the outback wilderness experience of the cowboy and is usually associated with the notion of masculinity and rugged experiences. This northwestern part of Texas is generally a rather conservative political section, so they tend to align towards sensitive and all-American conservative values as such. The movie reflected the overlaying idea of this closet, where many men within society today that swayed toward homosexual feelings remained hidden within. She also points out the heteronormative nature of the characters' lives outside of their relationship. It turns out that besides the gay affairs between both men, they behave according to typical heterosexual norms throughout most of the film, dating women, getting married, and raising children. Yet, the film is a queer cowboy movie, one in which homosexual desire is explored in relation to social and historical discourses of race, class, region, religion, gender, and the nuclear family. This closet, that they both seek refuge within, once they are apart, has stifled their freedom of feelings as it becomes some lonesome, self-repressed state of emotional consequences they must live with. She concludes this section of her paper with the following paragraph, which I find compelling. The film also reveals that homosexual desires are transparent or hidden in heterosexual societies. The scene where Jack's father tells Ennis that Jack is going to be buried in the family plot is an example of how his father disregards their relationship, just as he had ignored the fact he knew Jack was gay. This is another reason why the final closet scene was symbolic of discrimination our largely heterosexual society still faces today. Many people feel obligated to hide their feelings and true sexual orientations because it's not accepted or is portrayed in a satirical way or as a joke. Which brings us to the hot question of the day. Is Brokeback Mountain queer art? Well, I guess it depends on how one defines queer art. If queer art is exclusively made by queer artists, then Brokeback Mountain is not queer art. The source material was not written by a queer author, the movie was not directed by a queer person, nor was it portrayed by queer actors. At the same time, not all queer artists make queer art. For example, I don't think Pablo Alborán makes queer art. There's nothing wrong with that, I like his music very much. On the other hand, if queer art aims at portraying queer realities and stories, then Brokeback Mountain is queer art. It touches on masculinity and forbidden love between same-sex characters. It exposes the audience to the reality of depression and societal pressures. It depicts intimacy and portrays genuine same-sex connections. And it can be analyzed through the lens of the queer theory. Although the artists behind Brokeback Mountain are not queer themselves, its themes are inherently queer, and that's why the short story and the movie resonated with so many of us. It also helped expose on a larger scale the ridicule that queer people faced every day. The movie was mocked by many in the media, and the leading actors, two straight cisgender men, defended the movie and its themes much like we have to defend our relationships. Even GLAAD recognized the importance of this movie at the time of its release. But I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Is Brokeback Mountain queer art? And why? For all the reasons explored in this video, I think Brokeback Mountain is a very important piece of media, both for its artistic value and for its impact on popular culture. In the end, it's a movie with queer themes made by allies of our community. And perhaps this should serve as a reminder that allies can have as big of an impact on our community as we can. My name is Guy. If you liked the video, don't forget to like the video. You might also like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.